Alright guys, it is the start of day 5 out here. So anyway, right now I'm working on assembling the lower control arms. I had everything laid out yesterday, but I just run out of time working on that rear end. I've still got more rear end stuff to do. I need to actually blast the brake drums I have, get them cleaned up. I need to cut these studs off just a little bit to fit on these spacers. These spacers are, the stud hangs out of them, which kind of sucks. It's just a little bit. So I'm going to trim those off just a little bit to where they're flush. I actually might go get my steel wheel and look and see if, you know, some wheels have little indents where the lug nuts go. I may check that first before I chop all those off, but it's not that big a deal. But instead of, you know, changing them out, I'll just chop these down a little bit. Anyway, so rear end is almost done. I still got brake shoes and drums to do and get all that base adjusted. But all the brake lines are done and tight. I talked about that yesterday. Let's see, I'll talk about the bolts, the hardware for the front. I actually had a friend of mine call last night and to tell me, you know, that those bolts are at Lowe's. And I can tell you, they are not. So what you need to know is the hardware on front suspension for bolting your lower control arms to your chassis on a Tri-5 Chevy, or the ones that go up here that your shims go on for your front end alignment that bolt your A-arm to your chassis. Those are 7/16 by 20. They're fine thread. So Tractor Supply, which is 1/8 a mile right across the road from me, like I pull up to the highway, go through the stoplight, turn right, and I'm in their parking lot. Tractor Supply, Atwood's, downtown, Lowe's, does not carry 7/16 bolts. They go from like 3/8 to 1/2 inch. Don't know why, but that's the way it is. But their stuff is coarse thread. They don't even have fine thread stuff. So they are a little unique of a bolt to try to find local. So that's why I'm having a difficult time. The only place that would usually have those is Fastenal around here or Ace Hardware. But their bins were empty. Now the lady at Fastenal's said that she could order them. So yesterday I wanted to get them then, you know, so, and it just didn't work out. Now I was thinking about buying them online, but the reality is I'm gonna have to wait 3 to 5 days for them to come here. So I think I'll just go ahead and call Fastenal and tell them exactly what I need and have them order them in. Now I don't know if they can have them today or tomorrow, but either way, it'll be soon enough for me to get back on this, get rolling. So that's what I'm gonna do. But anyway, so let's get started. I do want to say, do not be tempted to put a coarse thread bolt in for your lower control arms and stuff, because fine thread gives you more surface area. You definitely want fine thread. That's what factory had. There's a reason for it. So pay attention to that. I even have fine threads in the ball joints. So anyway, I've got this one pretty much done. And this one I've just kind of gotten started, and I decided I better do a video. And basically what I'm about to tell you is just what I do. I don't care how anybody else does it, because there's all other these professionals out there. I'm just going to tell you what I do. And I learned a lesson the hard way when I was 19 or 20 years old, when I built my first frame off 55 of about 25, 55 Chevys I've had in my time. The very first one I built, I did not have a bunch of tools. I was a kid. So what I ended up doing was I bought a complete front end rebuild kit from POL, I think is who that was. And back then it was like 110 bucks or something for that entire kit that come with ball joints, tie rods, A-arm bushings, bump stops. I mean, it come with everything. But anyway, what I ended up buying was just stock replacement rubber stuff. So I took my control arms down to the local mechanic. I don't remember what he charged me to heat those up, knock the old bushings out, and press the new ones in and everything. But anyway, I come back home to my 55, which it was just the main body on the frame. It had no motor, no transmission in it, no front clip, and no front bumper. So when I built the front suspension, put it all together, I tightened the A-arm bolts all the way down tight. So after a time, I ended up putting the motor and trans in, front clip and bumper on, and I got to noticing that my bushings, my rubber bushings, were broken. They were ripped and sticking up. So what had happened was I installed the bolts completely tight and dry on the suspension because the frame was fully up in the air because of no weight of the engine. So when it came down and it was completely tight and dry, metal on rubber, it just ripped them. So I ended up having to buy another set of A-arm bushings, take them back to the mechanic shop, have the new ones taken out that were ruined, put the new ones in again. So I had to do it all over again. So this is what I found out, because I found this out from the well, I learned the hard way, but the guy that actually aligned the front end for me, I told him what I had done, and he goes, oh yeah, on this style of A-arm bushings, you never tighten these down until all the weight of the car is on it. Like, you don't want to put it on a lift and then do all this stuff and tighten it. You want to make sure it's on the ground with the weight on it. And he said he is always, when he's put them together, if they're all together, he will bounce the front suspension up and down pretty hard with his leg or his arm or hand or whatever, and then he will tighten them. So do not do what I did. Now here's another thing I do, and a lot of guys, I don't care if they don't like it or not, this is just what I do. I use a little bit of anti-seize on a brush, and I'll go down in the threads on that bushing, and then I will take a little bit of grease right here, just a little bit, and lightly glaze the front of this rubber bushing, and then lightly glaze this washer. So at that point, I will take this, I've already got anti-seize in there, I will take this and I will run it down by hand up there. And that's pretty much it. And then after the car is put together and, you know, the motor and everything in it, then I'll bounce it up and down, then I'll tighten everything. So I don't have a repeat. But anyway, I wouldn't glop up a bunch of grease in there. I'd just do a really light deal like I did, because grease attracts dirt and dust. So, you know, you don't want grease and grime getting up in there. So anyway, I did say this in the other video, do check your square nuts and your lower control arms. Make sure they're not stripped or torn up. These are 5/16 by 18 thread size. These come out kind of easy with an air hammer or a hammer and chisel, a little bit of hammering on them. But if you don't want to mess with trying to take the old one out, you can drill that hole bigger and pretty much just weld another 5/16 by 18 square nut on there and just use a longer bolt if you had to. So mine, I checked them and they're good, but now that I've painted them with the POR 15, that stuff's really thick. I'm going to run the thread cleaner back through these again. So now we'll get on to the ball joints. Now these are some inexpensive ball joints. Just says OE brand by FPD. It says replaces Moog, but I got to tell you, I couldn't afford the Moog, man. At my local O'Reilly's, they were like $80 or something each. Probably could have found them cheaper, but I ended up getting both of these. I think it was like 40 bucks or something. So, I mean, pretty inexpensive. You know, if it lasts a few years, it'll work. Because for now, I had a $1,000 budget to get this car up and running, and I have to pinch pennies where I can. In my opinion, that's not a smart move, but, you know, I got to do what I got to do. Now, when you put these ball joints in these Tri-5s, you're going to notice something. It happens quite a bit. When you bolt them in, sometimes these side bolts do not line up. The holes don't line up to put your bolt in. So do not take a hammer and whack the bolt in there, because you'll tear up your fine thread bolt. And don't stick the bolt in there and then just drive it home trying to thread it in there, because it'll also tear up the threads. What I do is I will bolt this ball joint in, these top 4 right here, I will completely bolt that in tight and done. And then I will take a 5/16 drill bit on the cordless drill, and I will just true that up a little bit. It usually doesn't take very much meat at all out, but it just trues it up so the bolts go in easy. Now, if you're doing this, like, of course, the ball joints come with bolts. They come with new hardware. These are grade 5 metric fine thread bolts. I like grade 8 in my suspension stuff, so I've gathered up 5/16 by 24 hardware. Now, these top 4 are 1 inch long. The side ones, the 2 side ones, are 3/4 long. So you're going to need 8 1 inch and 4 3/4 inch long ones. And again, make sure they're fine thread. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to drill these to at least one of them to get those to go. So anyway, just what I do. Now here's another thing I ran into, and it's just something I'm going to do because I don't have to spend any more money. These are the original rubber bump stops that go on the A-arms, like right here. These things are rotten. They're crumbling. but and not only they've been painted and stuff. Anyway, a new set of these is like 20 something dollars. Now I went through my tote over there of suspension stuff, and I have two energy suspension red urethane ones. So I just went ahead and put them on. They only use the one hole. They don't have the locator tab like the factory ones do. But these are lower, but these originals are soft rubber when they're new, super soft. So when your car bottoms out, if it's hard enough, this will compress probably all the way down to here, because this is a soft rubber. It's going to compress more than that urethane. So when this does bottom out, it's going to be about the same height at the end of the day. So I just used them because I had them here. I didn't have to spend any money. It saved me 20 something bucks. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to finish getting this control arm together, and then I'm going to call Fastenal for my hardware there. And shoot, I got to go to Tractor Supply and buy a bag of media because I'm out. I'm going to blast I'm going to blast my brake drums. You'd have never thought that'd be a tongue twister, would you? All right, guys, I dug through my suspension hardware for Tri-5 Chevy, and I've decided I'm just gonna use original hardware to bolt the A-arms to the frame and just clean them up on a wire wheel and paint them. Instead of worrying about trying to find brand new, I'm just, I'm over it at this point. So I got the lower control arms. I don't have them tight yet, but I have all 4 nuts, lock washers, and everything on. But I just wanted to replace the 2 bolts that go on each side for the uppers, the nuts and washers too. But it's just turned into a pain in the butt. I'm just going to use those. So I'll clean them up, paint them, and then put them on there. And then when I tighten everything up, it'll just flake all the paint off. So. All right, I got one side done. All the coil spring in. I even got the shock on. I haven't tightened the top shock nut yet, but the bottom is tight. Anyway, that's pretty cool. If you do all this and put new hardware and all kinds of stuff in, one thing you for sure want to check is turn it until it's full lock on the lock bar here on the A-arm. Check your clearance off the bottom of your ball joint bolt off of the bottom of the steering knuckle here. This is a disc brake kit, so it spaces it off of it. So just be aware of that. Just always check after I put one together and make sure, you know what I mean? Anyway, I got the cotter pins in. All the castle nuts are tight. I mean, it's pretty much in there and done. Didn't even tear any paint up on the coil spring or nothing. How awesome is that? Let's see. Got the A-arms tight to the frame here. Not these, obviously, but these are loose. I'm going to wait on those because I need to shim it, to align it. But I always do a driveway alignment. I do have a video on my Tri-5 Tech Tips, I think, on front end alignment at home to get you to the alignment shop, but I usually will set it all up, everything zeroed out and straight, and then if it drives fine with the hands off the wheel drive straight, I leave it. I don't ever go to the alignment shop. But anyway, so I got one more side to go. Here we go. All right, guys, one thing I'll do is, you'll notice the coil spring has the cutoff part on each end. You got your flat spot right here, your notch. There's also one up inside the chassis up there. So what I'll do is I'll get under there and I'll stick that coil spring and I'll lay down on my back to look up in there. I will find the spot where it locks into the frame, and then I'll take this grease pencil or marker, whatever's left of it, and I'll basically draw a straight line on the facing edge right here, straight out. That way, as I start setting everything up with my coil spring compressor and everything, I can go back and look and make sure the coil spring's where it needs to be. All right, guys, so I'm using a basic coil spring compressor. It's just the bolt end on this end. I have another, it's a grade 8 thick washer into there that I have anti-seize on both sides. And then I stick the stud part through there, and then have the claws close together, and then I catch it as far down as I can with it down here. Then I tighten it up, and it pulls that coil spring up into the frame a little bit. Problem is, it puts it out here at a pretty good angle, so when you try to pull your A-arm up, the coil's aiming way out here. But at that point, I take a pry bar like this, and I have this rag on there, and I basically stick it down inside that coil like that, and I push down on the bar and it doesn't really take that much pressure, and it curves that coil spring over into the pocket, and then I use the other hand and jack up the jack on the bottom of that pocket down there and to get the coil down in its little slot, and that's how I pretty much get it started. So at this point I will get the impact back on this, and I'll drive her down quite a ways, and then I will put all my weight up here on the frame, and that will usually put this in there. I have in the past taken out the rubber bump stop here to get all this together, doing it this way without if you got your engine and trans in, it's easy to do with just a floor jack. But anyway, I don't have any of the weight, so I have to rely on the tool to do all the work. But anyway, I've taken the rubber insulators out of here before. That way it allows the A-arm to come down a little bit further so you can get it hooked, at least get a couple threads on the nut. But in this case, I tried it over there, and it worked, because after you get your motor and trans in all the way to the car, your A-arm comes up enough off that rubber bump stop that you can reach up in there and put the new one on. But anyway, I'm just doing it this way. I've seen guys using all thread and taking off the lower control arm and running the all thread through there and just basically using coil, lower A-arm and all, and getting it up there. I've never tried it that way, but yeah, if it works for them, that's fine. But this is just the way I've always done it. Not fun. I remember working for a guy when I was a kid in my early 20s. I worked at a rod shop, hot rod shop, and I watched a guy take a come along and hook the hook right here and went over somewhere, I don't even remember, went over the frame over to the other side, and he would ratchet it like that, and the come along would actually, the cable would go across the frame. It was a nice painted frame. I mean, it wasn't super nice, but he had painted everything all together, so you know, he didn't have a lot of detail in it. But anyway, it just tore the crap out of the frame paint. And I've never seen anybody do that since. I would never do that, but it's just kind of a funny story. But now I do leave my lower A-arm bolts loose, and then once I get everything, you know, I get that nut on that upper ball joint, then I'll go in and I'll tighten these, and then I'll tighten up the nuts. But anyway, that's how I do it. Go ahead and tighten up the A-arm nuts. I actually forgot about that. Oh, one of these days I'll put that new fitting on this air hose. It's leaking. Alright guys, I'm pretty sure you probably know how to put a shock on the front of a 55 Chevy or 6 or 7. What I usually do is you get 2 washers. I look and see which one's the nicest. This one looks a little scuffed up, so I'm going to put it on first. It'll go on there like that. Then you take your little rubber bushings right here. You'll notice you got a big section here. This is a small section. So you basically want the small section to go on the shock on that, to where the small is up, because that has to go through the hole in your frame right there. The other side's too big to go in there. So when I stick this up in there, I'll take the other bushing, which is identical as the small and then the large, and the small part will go down into the frame. Big side will go to the washer. So I have seen guys put these washers on like this. That ain't the way they go. The dome cradles the bushing, so it will go like that. Dome always cradles the rubber bushing. I have seen, I've been in and out of a lot of mechanic shops, and I've seen this upside down a bunch. So anyway, what do you know, there's actually instructions in this one. I didn't see an instruction sheet in the other one. Let's see if it, I don't have my glasses on. Who needs directions, right? Oh, no stinking directions. I do need my bolts for the shocks though. So now that I know how to put videos together to make one video with, like, 5 video clips on it, on average it takes me about an hour and 52 is what's normal minutes to upload the video to YouTube. That's not editing the video and putting all the videos together and then checking them and everything, and then trimming them down if you got to do that and put all the fancy stuff in there, which I'm probably not ever going to put music in any of my videos. I'm just not. Every time it seems like when I watch somebody's video and they've dubbed it with music, the music's too loud and it drives me crazy, so I probably will never do music overlay on any of my videos, but to each his own, I guess. You also, usually, on some shocks, I've not noticed it on a few of the really cheap shocks. Some shocks you get 2 nuts per shock. You'll get a thick one and a thin one. This is the thin one. So basically after you tighten down the thicker nut on there and get the shock all done, this is basically your lock nut to keep the old nut on. So the thin nut goes on top last. All right, now we got new ball joints, A-arm bushings, new KYB shocks. It's almost a restored car. Almost. But not really. Okay. Here's my trusty impact pad. If that's a slotted in shock, like where these 2 bolts go, or it's slotted on both ends, make sure you center that body of that shock dead middle of that big hole in that A-arm down there. Okay. All right, guys. So that is one big headache out of the way. I got to tell you, I'm glad that's over. All right, guys. This is the end of day 5. I'm quitting a little early. It's I'd say around 4 p.m. I've got my back irritated quite a bit from working on this suspension, you know, climbing up and down and bending over and all that stuff. So I don't want to make it worse, so I'm going to go ahead and quit for the night, and I should be okay tomorrow, hopefully. Anyway, I got the shocks are on and tight. All the cotter pins are in the ball joints. All that's tight. I mean, the biggest part of the front suspension is bolted on, which is coil springs and A-arms. I mean, other than the uppers, they're not tight. But I think that's pretty good for a day's work. So tomorrow when I come out and get started, I'm going to clean up the brake calipers and the brake pads and all that from me not painting it when I pulled it all out of the box and put it on here before when it was a runner driver with a 6-cylinder in it. I mean, I just drove it to the end of the block and back, so it's still pretty much brand new parts. But the car sat outside, so all that stuff rusted. The rotors look pretty bad. They got surface rust like that on them. So I'm going to clean all that stuff up tomorrow and get it all painted. And then get the rotors and calipers and everything put on. Get the brake hoses put on. And the clips in there. So it'll be another day of suspension tomorrow. So I need to go to the Tractor Supply in the morning. I'm going to get a bag of blast media, which is coal slag, Black Beauty, I think is what it is. You know, I'm going to blast my rear brake drums. They're pretty crusty. And then I may install all the drum brake stuff on the back of the rear end, get all that done. I need to locate my 2 U-joint caps or girdles, whatever you want to call them. The little straps that go on there and the 4 bolts. I've got a miscellaneous tray of stuff like that. I should have it, but that is it, man. That is it for today for me. I mean, that was I mean, the reality is that was a pretty big job, and man, does it look fantastic. I got some runs in the A-arms and stuff, but I really don't care. It's just a driver, but I did want the stuff clean looking where, you know, if I ever got to go in and work on it, at least it'll be all clean and fresh underneath, you know. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.